My name is Cassandra Miles. I'm 41. Last Saturday at 7:43 p.m., I was standing in front of a floor-to-ceiling window at the Mountain Lodge in Denver, holding a champagne flute I hadn't asked for, watching my younger brother Parker circle the room like he owned every molecule of oxygen in it. The string quartet was playing something expensive. The snow outside looked fake, too perfect, like someone had ordered it specifically for his engagement party. And then Parker saw me. Cassandra! His voice cut through the Vivaldi. 37 heads turned. I counted them later. Come here. I want you to meet someone. I knew that tone. I'd heard it my entire life. It was the voice he used before he broke something of mine and blamed me for leaving it where he could reach it. I walked over. My heels clicked on imported marble. Parker had his arm around a silver-haired man in a navy suit, someone important enough that the other guests had formed a respectful half-circle around them. My brother's fiancée, Madison, stood beside him in a dress that cost more than my rent. She wouldn't look at me. "This is Theodore Ramsey," Parker said. His smile was all teeth. "He's the CEO of Ramsey Logistics, my boss." I felt my stomach drop. I knew that name. "And this," Parker continued, his hand landing on my shoulder with just enough pressure to keep me in place, "is Cassandra, our family's failure." The words hung there. Someone's champagne glass clinked against a table. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. Theodore Ramsey's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He was looking at me the way you look at a photograph you've been searching for in a crowded drawer. My mother, Barbara, laughed first. It was her cocktail party laugh, the one that signaled to everyone else that it was safe to join in. "Oh, Parker, you're terrible." "I'm serious," Parker said. He was still smiling. "Cassandra's 41 and still doing freelance consulting. Can you imagine? Meanwhile, I'm about to close the Hendricks account, $47,000 commission." My father, George, appeared beside us with fresh drinks. He handed one to Theodore Ramsey and completely ignored me. Parker's always been the ambitious one. Cassandra never quite figured out how to apply herself. I felt my face burn. Not from embarrassment, from the specific heat that comes from hearing a lie repeated so many times it starts to sound like truth. "Actually," I said quietly, "I specialize in corporate turnarounds for mid-sized businesses. I've restructured 15 companies in the last 8 years." Parker's smile widened. "Restructured? That's a nice way of saying you help dying companies delay the inevitable." He turned to Theodore Ramsey. "She works out of a coffee shop, uses the free Wi-Fi." That part was true. I did work from coffee shops. I also worked from client offices, airport lounges, my apartment at 2 a.m., when the numbers finally started making sense. But Parker had a gift for taking truth and twisting it until it bled. "The Hendricks account," Theodore Ramsey said slowly. He was still looking at me. "That's interesting timing. Before I go on, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there." Parker launched into his pitch. He'd been working the Hendricks account for 9 months, he said. Personal relationship with the CFO. Custom proposal. Revolutionary logistics strategy that would save them 18% on transport costs. He'd practically moved into the office to get it done. I stopped listening around the second sentence because I knew every word of that proposal. I'd written it 3 years ago when I was a junior analyst at Morrison and Fletcher, before Parker got me fired by submitting $4,200 in personal expenses under my employee number and making it look like I'd approved them myself. The Hendricks proposal had been my first major project. I'd spent 6 weeks analyzing their supply chain, identifying redundancies, building financial models that showed exactly how consolidating their Midwest distribution centers would cut costs without sacrificing delivery times. My supervisor at the time, Jennifer Ortega, had called it the most thorough analysis I've seen from a first-year analyst. Parker had been an intern that summer. He'd asked to review my work for learning purposes. I'd said yes because he was my brother, and because I still believed back then that family meant something. 2 weeks after I got fired, Parker got promoted. The Hendricks proposal, slightly modified with his name on it, had been the reason. Cassandra? My mother's voice was sharp. You're being rude. Theodore asked you a question. I blinked. I'm sorry. What? Theodore Ramsey's eyes were kind, but there was something else there too. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. I asked what kind of consulting you do, specifically. I help businesses that are failing, I said. Companies that have good bones but poor execution. I go in, analyze their financials, identify the problems, and create turnaround strategies. Do you have any success stories? Parker laughed. Define success. I looked at Theodore Ramsey directly. Ignored my brother. Ignored my parents. Ignored the 37 witnesses who were pretending not to listen. 15 years ago, I did pro bono work for a logistics company in Kansas City that was 3 months from bankruptcy. They had cash flow problems, vendor relationship issues, and an outdated routing system that was costing them $80,000 a month in unnecessary fuel expenses. I restructured their vendor contracts, implemented a new routing algorithm, and created a payment schedule that gave them breathing room. Within 18 months, they were profitable again. The room had gone very quiet. Theodore Ramsey set down his champagne glass. What was the name of the company? Ramsey Logistics, I said. Parker's smile vanished. You never billed us, Theodore Ramsey said softly. I tried to find you afterward, to pay you, to thank you properly. But you'd left Morrison and Fletcher, and nobody knew where you'd gone. My mother made a small sound. My father's face had gone the color of old newspaper. I was going through some personal challenges, I said carefully. Career transition. She got fired, Parker said. His voice was too loud. For expense fraud, that's why they couldn't find her. Theodore Ramsey turned to look at my brother for the first time since I'd started talking. The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. Is that so? He said. Let me take you back 15 years to a Tuesday morning in August. I was 26, sitting in a conference room at Morrison and Fletcher with my supervisor Jennifer Ortega, and 2 people from Human Resources I'd never met before. There was a manila folder on the table between us. Jennifer wouldn't look at me. These are expense reports submitted under your employee number, the HR director said. She was a woman named Patricia something. She had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled. $4,200 in unauthorized purchases over the last 6 weeks. I stared at the printouts. Dinner at the Venetian in Las Vegas, $890. Hotel stay at the Fontainebleau in Miami Beach, $1,240. Clothing purchases at Nordstrom, $680. Party planning services, $950. Photographer and band deposits, $1,440. I had been to exactly none of those places. I had purchased exactly none of those things. This isn't me, I said. It's your employee number, Patricia said. Your login credentials, your approval signature on the reimbursement forms. I don't know how this happened, but I didn't submit these. I've never been to Las Vegas. I can show you my credit card statements, my calendar, my... We've already reviewed your calendar, Jennifer interrupted. She finally looked at me. You had those days marked as personal time. You took vacation. I had taken vacation. 4 days in late June to help my grandfather move into assisted living. I'd driven him from his house in St. Louis to a care facility in Columbia, Missouri. We'd spent 3 days sorting through 60 years of accumulated memories, packing boxes, arguing about which furniture he could bring and which he had to donate. I told them this. I had photos on my phone of Grandpa sitting in his new room, holding his favorite lamp, smiling that sad smile people get when they're trying to be brave about losing their independence. That doesn't prove you weren't in Las Vegas, Patricia said. I can get you witness statements, the moving company, the facility staff, gas station receipts from Missouri. We need to move forward, Jennifer said quietly. The partners have already made their decision. I was escorted out that afternoon. They disabled my key card at 2:17 p.m. I had exactly 23 minutes to pack my desk. Parker was in the break room when I left. He was talking to two other interns, laughing about something. He saw me carrying my box of belongings and waved. "Leaving early?" he called out. "Something like that," I said. He came over, looked at the box, looked at my face. "You okay?" "They fired me." "What? Why?" I told him. He listened with this perfect expression of concern and confusion. When I finished, he put his hand on my shoulder. Same spot he'd touched tonight at the engagement party. Same pressure. "That's insane," he said. "You didn't do any of that stuff. Everyone knows you're the most honest person here." "Someone used my credentials," I said. "Someone who knew my schedule. Someone who knew I'd be out of town." Parker's face was so sincere. "We'll figure out who did this. I'll help you, I promise." I believed him. I actually believed him. 3 weeks later, I found out Parker had gotten promoted to full-time analyst. The email announcement from HR praised his initiative and attention to detail and specifically mentioned his instrumental role in identifying expense fraud within the department. By then, I'd already spent 2 weeks sleeping on my friend Rachel's couch, sending out resumes to every consulting firm in the Midwest, trying to explain the gap in my employment without saying the words "fired for fraud." Rachel was kind about it. She made coffee every morning and told me to take my time, but I could see it in her eyes. The question, the doubt. Did you actually do it? I got exactly 4 interview callbacks out of 63 applications. 2 ended the moment they called Morrison and Fletcher for references. One offered me a temporary contract position at $18 an hour with no benefits. The fourth was a small firm in Overland Park, Kansas, that specialized in corporate restructuring. They hired me as a junior consultant with the understanding that I'd be rebuilding my professional reputation. The work was good, hard. I spent 18 months proving myself on every single project, documenting every decision, keeping meticulous records. My boss, Martin Kowalski, was a 64-year-old former CEO who'd lost his own company to a hostile takeover and decided to spend his retirement helping other people save theirs. He had this way of looking at you when you presented analysis that made you feel like he could see through numbers straight into your soul. "You're good at this," he told me once, 6 months in. "Better than good. You see patterns other people miss." "Thank you," I said. "So why are you working here for peanuts instead of making 6 figures at a big firm?" I told him. Everything. The expenses, the firing, Parker's promotion. The way my own family had acted like it was somehow my fault for being careless with my login credentials. Martin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for about 30 seconds. "You know what the problem with being honest is?" he said finally. "What?" "Honest people think everyone else is honest too. We keep waiting for the truth to matter, but truth doesn't matter until you have proof, and sometimes not even then." He assigned me to the Ramsey Logistics project the next week. "Pro bono," he said. "Theodore Ramsey is a friend of mine. Good man. His company's in trouble, but it's savable. I want you to handle it personally." I spent 3 months on that project, interviewed every department head, analyzed 5 years of financial statements, built routing models, negotiated with vendors who'd been threatening to terminate contracts. Theodore Ramsey was there for most of it, asking questions, taking notes, implementing changes faster than most CEOs I'd worked with. "Why aren't you billing us?" he asked once, late on a Thursday night when we were both still in the office at 9 p.m. "Martin's call," I said. "Consider it an investment in your company's future." "What's in it for you?" I thought about that. Proof that I'm good at what I do. When Ramsey Logistics turned profitable again, Theodore sent a check to our firm for $50,000. Martin tried to give it all to me. I took $5,000 and told him to use the rest for the business. I didn't need the money as much as I needed the validation of knowing I'd saved something that everyone else had written off as dead. I never saw Theodore Ramsey again after that project. Until tonight. Back at the engagement party, my mother was doing damage control. Cassandra's memory isn't always reliable, she said to Theodore Ramsey. Her voice had taken on that smooth, diplomatic tone she used when she was lying. She tends to exaggerate her role in things. I kept the report, Theodore Ramsey said. He wasn't looking at her. He was still looking at me. The full turnaround strategy, 300 pages. Every recommendation you made, we implemented. Every single one worked. That report saved my company. Parker's jaw was tight. I'm sure Cassandra contributed, but your name isn't on the report, Theodore said flatly. Hers is. The thing about moments like this is that they don't feel triumphant when they're happening. They feel surreal. Like you've suddenly stepped into a parallel dimension where words mean what they actually mean, and people believe the truth when they hear it. I should go, I said quietly. No, Theodore Ramsey said. Stay. Please. I have some questions about the Hendricks proposal Parker mentioned. My brother's face went very pale. Over the next 20 minutes, Theodore asked Parker extremely specific questions about logistics algorithms, vendor consolidation strategies, and financial modeling techniques. Parker answered maybe 3 of them coherently. The rest he deflected with vague business speak about collaborative team efforts and synthesizing multiple perspectives. I watched my parents' expressions change as they slowly understood what was happening. My father stopped smiling around question 7. My mother's champagne glass started trembling slightly around question 12. Cassandra, Theodore said, turning away from Parker mid-sentence. Do you have time to talk tomorrow, privately? I have a client meeting at 10, I said, but I'm free afternoon. Perfect. Come by my office. I have a proposition for you. He shook my hand, nodded politely to my parents, and walked away. Parker stood there with his mouth half open, looking like someone had just explained to him that gravity worked differently than he'd thought. Madison, his fiancée, touched his arm gently. Honey, what just happened? Nothing, Parker said. His voice was sharp. Cassandra's trying to make me look bad. It's what she does. But he left the party 18 minutes later. I timed it. I stayed until 10:30 p.m. Not because I wanted to, but because leaving immediately would have looked like retreat. I talked to Parker's future in-laws, who were kind in that uncomfortable way people are when they've just witnessed a public humiliation they don't understand. I ate a piece of cake that tasted like expensive chalk. I watched the snow fall against the massive windows and thought about all the things I should have said to my brother over the years and never did. At 10:47 p.m., and I drove back to my apartment in Aurora. It was a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building with unreliable heat and a parking lot that never got plowed properly. I'd lived there for 6 years. The rent was $1,240 a month, which was just barely manageable when I had consistent client contracts and borderline impossible when I didn't. I made tea, sat on my couch, stared at the wall. My phone rang at 11:33 p.m. It was my mother. You embarrassed Parker tonight, she said. No hello, no preamble. I answered questions honestly, I said. You knew that man. You set this up somehow. I haven't seen Theodore Ramsey in 15 years, Mom. I didn't even know Parker worked for him. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of your brother's success. I closed my eyes. I'm hanging up now. Your father and I think it would be best if you didn't come to the wedding. The words landed like stones. Excuse me? Madison's family is very traditional. They don't understand all this workplace drama. It would be easier if you just stayed away. We'll explain that you're busy with work or something. You're uninviting me to my own brother's wedding. Don't be dramatic, Cassandra. We're trying to keep things peaceful. For who? She didn't answer that. We both knew. I hung up, turned off my phone, sat in the dark, and thought about all the times I'd apologized for things I hadn't done. stayed quiet when I should have spoken, smiled when I wanted to scream. My grandfather used to say, "Silence costs more than you think you're paying." He'd died 4 years ago, 3 months after I'd moved him into assisted living. The week before he died, he'd called me to his room and handed me a folder of documents. "What's this?" I'd asked. "Your education fund," he'd said. "The one I set up when you were 12, $50,000. It was supposed to pay for college, help you get started after graduation." I opened the folder. Bank statements, transfer records, all of it documented. The final transfer, dated 6 weeks before my 18th birthday, had gone to an account in Parker's name. "I don't understand," I said. "Your parents redirected it," Grandpa said. His voice was tired. "They told me you'd gotten a full scholarship and didn't need the money. They said Parker's tuition was more expensive, that he needed help with his apartment deposits and books. I believed them." I looked at the dates. My 18th birthday had been in October. Parker had started college that September. The money had paid for his first year of tuition at a private university, his security deposits, his furniture, everything my parents had told me we couldn't afford for me. "I went to community college," I said quietly. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for it." "I know," Grandpa said. "I found out last year when I was reviewing my estate planning. I'm sorry, Cass, I should have checked. I should have asked you directly." He'd tried to set up a new fund for me in his will, but by then his medical expenses had eaten through most of his savings. The cancer treatments weren't covered by insurance. The experimental drug trial had cost $90,000. I'd helped him apply for financial assistance programs, reviewed his bills, negotiated with the hospital. He'd died owing $23,000 that his estate couldn't cover. I'd paid it, liquidated my tiny retirement account, took out a personal loan for the rest. It had taken me 2 years to pay off that loan. My parents never knew. They'd never asked how Grandpa's final expenses got handled. The next morning, Sunday, I went to meet Theodore Ramsey at his office. It was in a glass tower in the Denver Tech Center, the kind of building with a lobby waterfall and security guards who checked IDs. Theodore's assistant, a cheerful woman named Diane, brought me coffee and told me Mr. Ramsey would be right out. He appeared 5 minutes later, still in weekend casual, jeans and a button-down shirt instead of yesterday's suit. "Thank you for coming," he said. We shook hands. "I know this is unusual timing." "It's fine." He led me to his office. Corner suite, views of the mountains, photos on the desk of what I assumed were grandkids. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "I need someone to run turnaround projects for our consulting division. Full-time position. Salary range is $95,000 to $110,000, depending on experience, plus performance bonuses, full benefits, company car allowance." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "That's generous." "It's fair market value for someone with your skills. And before you ask, yes, this is about last night. Not because I'm doing you a favor, but because I've been looking for someone like you for 8 months and couldn't find anyone. Then you walked into my grandson's engagement party and I realized I'd already found you 15 years ago." "Your grandson?" "Madison's my granddaughter. Parker's fiancée, small world." It was starting to make sense. The way he'd looked at Parker, the questions about the Hendricks proposal. "There's something you should know," I said. "Parker and I have a complicated history. If I work for you, that's going to create problems. I'm aware. Madison told me some of it this morning. How Parker talks about you. How your parents treat you." He paused. "She also told me she thinks Parker might have lied about the Hendricks proposal. She said last night was the first time she'd ever seen him unable to answer technical questions about his own work." "It's complicated," I said again. "Then uncomplicate it for me." So I did. I told him everything. Morrison and Fletcher, the expense fraud, Parker's promotion, the Hendricks proposal that I'd written 3 years ago. Theodore listened the way Martin used to listen. Quiet, focused, taking in information without judgment. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. I'm going to tell you what I told my son when he was deciding whether to join this company 20 years ago. I can't promise you that working here will be easy. I can't promise you that everyone will like you or respect you immediately. What I can promise is that if you do good work, you will be credited for it. If someone tries to steal your work, I will fire them. And if anyone in my company commits fraud, I will prosecute them personally. Even if it's family? I asked quietly. Especially if it's family. I took the job. 2 days later, I submitted my notice to my current clients, giving them 30 days to transition. Most of them were understanding. A few were disappointed but supportive. One, a manufacturing company in Boulder I'd been working with for 9 months, offered to increase my consulting rate if I'd stay independent. I thanked them and declined. Parker called me on Wednesday evening. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "You took a job at Ramsey Logistics," he said. "No hello." Madison told me. "Yes. You did this on purpose, to get close to her family, to turn them against me." "I took the job because it's a good opportunity." "You're going to try to sabotage me," he said. "You're going to tell everyone about the Morrison and Fletcher thing, make me look bad, get me fired." "Parker," I said carefully, "I haven't thought about you in months. This has nothing to do with you." "Liar. Think whatever you want. I have to go." "You've always been jealous," he said. "Mom and Dad tried to help you, gave you chances, and you wasted all of them. Now you're trying to ruin my life because yours didn't work out." I hung up, blocked his number, blocked my parents' numbers too. I started at Ramsey Logistics the following Monday. My first assignment was a distribution company in Pueblo that was hemorrhaging money from inefficient routes and vendor contracts that hadn't been renegotiated in 7 years. It was exactly the kind of problem I was good at solving. 3 weeks into my new job, I got an email from Parker's work address. Subject line: "We need to talk." I almost deleted it. Instead, I forwarded it to Theodore with a note. "FYI, Parker is contacting me directly, wanted you to be aware." Theodore's response came back in under 2 minutes. Noted. Please forward any future communications from him. Do not respond. The next email from Parker came 2 days later. This one was different. He'd CC'd Jennifer Ortega from Morrison and Fletcher and someone from their legal department. "Dear Ms. Miles," it began, formal, threatening. "It has come to our attention that you have been making false statements about your termination from Morrison and Fletcher in 2011. These statements constitute defamation and have damaged the professional reputation of current employees, including Parker Miles. We demand that you cease and desist from making any further claims about events surrounding your departure from the firm. Additionally, we request a formal written apology for statements made to Theodore Ramsey and others regarding the Hendricks proposal and alleged expense fraud." I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking. I forwarded it to Theodore. He called me 30 seconds later. "Don't respond," he said. "I'm having our legal team handle this. Also, I need to tell you something. I did some digging into the Hendricks proposal, pulled the original files from our system. The proposal Parker submitted last month is a modified version of a document that was created 3 years ago. The metadata shows the original author was assigned employee number 4729 at Morrison and Fletcher. I'm guessing that was you?" "Yes," I said. "That was my employee number." The modifications Parker made were minimal, mostly updating dates and changing the formatting. The core analysis, the financial models, the routing algorithms, all identical to the original. So he stole my work. Yes, and he submitted it as part of his performance review to justify a promotion and a commission. That's fraud. Internal fraud against my company, since we paid him for work he didn't do. What are you going to do? I'm still deciding. But Cassandra, I need to know if you want to pursue the Morrison and Fletcher situation. Because if you do, I have resources. Lawyers, investigators, people who can dig into what actually happened back then. I thought about it. Thought about all the years I'd spent trying to move past it, trying to rebuild, telling myself it didn't matter anymore. I want the truth, I said. I don't need revenge. I just want people to know what actually happened. Fair enough. Give me 2 weeks. Theodore's legal team worked fast. Within 10 days, they'd subpoenaed records from Morrison and Fletcher, interviewed former employees, and tracked down security logs and expense report metadata that had been archived for over a decade. The evidence was damning. The fraudulent expense reports had all been submitted from a computer in the intern bullpen, the shared workspace where Parker had sat during his internship. The IP logs showed they'd been entered during hours when I'd been documented as out of the office. The approval signatures had been forged using a scanned copy of my signature from an earlier, legitimate expense report. But the real smoking gun was an email Parker had sent to his personal Gmail account 3 days before I got fired. Subject line: Insurance. The body of the email contained screenshots of my login credentials, notes about my vacation schedule, and a draft timeline for submitting the fraudulent expenses. He'd literally emailed himself a blueprint of the frame-up. Morrison and Fletcher's current legal counsel contacted me directly. They wanted to settle quietly. Full acknowledgement of wrongful termination, formal apology, sealed monetary compensation in the low 6 figures, and an agreement that I wouldn't pursue civil or criminal charges. I said no to the money, yes to the apology, no to the seal. The letter came on Morrison and Fletcher letterhead, signed by the managing partner and 2 members of their executive committee. Dear Ms. Miles, after a thorough review of records from your 2011 termination, we have determined that you were wrongfully accused of expense fraud and improperly dismissed from your position as junior analyst. The fraudulent expenses submitted under your employee credentials were in fact submitted by another individual who gained unauthorized access to your login information. We deeply regret the harm this caused to your professional reputation and career. We acknowledge that our investigation at the time was inadequate and that we failed to properly verify the source of the fraudulent activity before terminating your employment. This failure violated our own standards of due process and professional ethics. Please accept our sincere apology for the injustice done to you. We are taking steps to ensure this kind of failure does not happen again. They sent copies to every major consulting firm in the region, posted a version on their website, emailed it to former employees from my cohort year. Parker was fired from Ramsey Logistics the same day the letter was released. Theodore called me into his office to tell me personally. He submitted his resignation this morning, Theodore said. We were going to terminate him for the Hendricks fraud, but he got out ahead of it. Madison broke off the engagement last night. I'm sorry, I said. And I was. Not for Parker, but for Madison, who'd gotten caught in the blast radius of her grandfather's commitment to honesty. Don't be. She's the one who figured it out. She found emails on Parker's laptop, correspondence where he was bragging to friends about borrowing your old work. She brought them to me. 3 days later, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered by accident, thinking it was a potential client. You destroyed your brother's life, she said. No hello, no preamble, same as always. Parker destroyed his own life, I said. I just told the truth. He's humiliated. The wedding is canceled. His career is ruined. Good. How can you say that? He's your brother. He framed me for fraud when I was 26, I said. He stole my work. He stole Grandpa's education fund. He spent 15 years making sure everyone in our family believed I was a failure. So no, Mom, I don't feel bad that he's finally facing consequences. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. She hung up. I haven't heard from her since. 2 weeks later, my Aunt Irene called. She was my mother's younger sister, the one who'd never quite fit into our family's idea of success. She'd been a public school teacher for 30 years, lived in a modest house in Littleton, drove a 2009 Honda Civic that she'd paid off in cash. My parents talked about her with condescension disguised as concern. I heard what happened with Parker, Irene said. I wanted to invite you to dinner, just you, this Saturday if you're free. I went. Her house was small but warm, the kind of place where every surface had photos or books or plants that actually thrived. She made lasagna and salad and garlic bread that was slightly burned on the edges in the way that makes it taste better. We ate and talked about normal things for a while. Her students, my new job, the ridiculous amount of snow Denver had gotten in March. Then over coffee, she got serious. "I need to tell you some things," she said. "Things your mother doesn't know I know." She told me about the education fund, how she'd been there when Grandpa set it up, how she'd watched him put aside money every year, how proud he'd been that he could help his eldest grandchild go to college without debt, how my mother had called him a month before my 18th birthday and told him I'd gotten a full scholarship to Northwestern. "It was a lie," Irene said. "You didn't even apply to Northwestern. But your mother sold it beautifully. She had all these details about the scholarship program, the acceptance letter, how grateful you were. Your grandfather believed her completely." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've watched you carry the weight of this family's dysfunction for 20 years, and I'm tired of being complicit by staying silent." She reached across the table and took my hand. "After Grandpa died, I found something. Records he'd kept. He figured out what your mother had done. Not right away, but eventually. He knew about the redirected fund. He knew about the cancer bills you paid. He knew about the loans you'd given to cousins when they were in trouble. The money you'd sent me when I had to have emergency surgery and couldn't work for 2 months. He never said anything. He was ashamed of himself for not seeing it sooner, of your mother for exploiting his trust. He wanted to make it right, but by then he was too sick." She got up, went to a drawer, and pulled out a folder. "He left this with me, asked me to give it to you when the time was right." Inside was a ledger, handwritten entries in Grandpa's careful script, dating back 15 years. Every time I'd helped someone in the family financially. Every dollar I'd given and never asked to be repaid. $800 to cousin Michael for car repairs. $1,200 to Aunt Irene for medical bills. $450 to cousin Sarah for textbooks. $2,100 to nephew James for security deposit. It went on for pages. The total at the bottom, underlined twice. $47,380. There was a note paperclipped to the last page. "Cassandra, you've been this family's silent banker for years. They took from you because you gave freely. They criticized you because your generosity made their selfishness visible. You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. Grandpa." I sat there holding his handwriting and crying for the first time in months. "He wanted you to know," Irene said gently, "that he saw you, that what you did mattered." The Saturday after Thanksgiving, my parents hosted their annual family dinner. It was a tradition that went back 30 years. Everyone gathered at their house in Cherry Hills, ate too much food, pretended we all liked each other. I'd gone every year since I was born. This year, I didn't get an invitation. Irene did. She called me the Monday after and told me what happened. Parker had shown up, brought a new girlfriend, some woman he'd met at a networking event, spent the entire evening talking about his new job at a startup in Boulder, how he was really excited about this next chapter, how sometimes setbacks are actually blessings in disguise. Nobody mentioned me, not once, until dessert, when Parker's girlfriend asked, "Do you have any other children?" There was a long pause. "We have a daughter," my father said finally. "Cassandra. She's not with us anymore." Irene said she'd nearly spit out her coffee. "George, she's not dead. She lives in Aurora." "We're estranged," my mother said quickly. "It's complicated." "It's not complicated," Irene said. "You uninvited her to Parker's wedding after she told the truth about him stealing her work. You chose to believe his lies over her honesty. You've spent her entire life redirecting resources meant for her to Parker. You stole her grandfather's education fund. You've criticized her career while she was quietly paying for family members' emergencies, including your father's funeral expenses that you couldn't be bothered to cover." The table went silent. "Irene," my mother said in a warning tone. "No, I'm done being quiet. Cassandra has spent 20 years being this family's scapegoat, and I'm done watching it happen. Irene stood up, put her napkin on her plate. I'm leaving. And I'm going to Cassandra's house for actual dessert with someone who doesn't require me to lie about who she is. She left, drove straight to my apartment with a pie from the grocery store and a bottle of wine. We ate pie on my couch and watched football and didn't talk about my parents at all. That was 3 months ago. Today is a regular Tuesday in March. I'm sitting in my office at Ramsey Logistics, actual office, with a door and a window and a nameplate that says Cassandra Miles, Director of Corporate Restructuring. I've successfully completed turnarounds for 4 companies in the last 6 months. My performance bonus last quarter was $18,000. I just got off a video call with a manufacturing company in Tulsa that's considering hiring us. The CEO asked about my background. I told him about Morrison and Fletcher, the wrongful termination, the formal apology. I didn't hide it. I didn't minimize it. He said, "So you've been exactly where my company is now. Accused of something you didn't do, fighting to prove the truth." "Yes," I said. "That's exactly where I've been." "Then you're the right person to help us." My phone buzzes. Text from Irene. "Dinner this weekend? I'm making lasagna." I text back, "I'll bring wine." Outside my window, it's starting to snow again. Not the perfect ordered snow from Parker's engagement party. Real snow. The kind that melts on contact with warm glass and makes everything temporarily clean. I think about 15-year-old me, filling out college applications at the public library because we didn't have internet at home, believing my parents when they said we couldn't afford a university. I think about 26-year-old me, carrying a box of belongings out of Morrison and Fletcher, believing that truth would matter eventually. I think about 41-year-old me, standing in a room full of people who'd been told I was a failure, finally hearing someone say, "I kept your report." If you're watching this, and you've ever been the person everyone underestimated, the one who got blamed for someone else's mistakes, the one who gave and gave until there was nothing left and then got criticized for being empty, type "I was the ghost" in the comments. Or if you're the one who finally stopped being silent and spoke your truth, even when it cost you, type "I spoke anyway." Both are valid, both are brave. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here.